So, what encouragement or advice would you give someone who has grown up in a Christian household and is trying to cultivate a relationship with the Lord for themselves, apart from it just being their parents' walk with the Lord?
Yes, that's a great question. And, that's something I had to learn through myself or for myself and kind of live through.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say do not feed off of your family's faith.
Mm-hmm.
Like we mentioned
That's
earlier,
great advice.
like you get spiritually fed when you're in the word and spending time with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you have a community just to discuss your walk with.
Yeah.
And I think I just, without even completely realizing it, like I was aware I was doing it, but it was just almost second nature to a
Mm-hmm.
point of me just expecting others to tell me things. And I was like, okay, I know you're biblically sound, so I believe you.
Yeah.
So I would just like take your word and maybe not like look into it myself,
Yeah.
or take my dad's word and not look into it myself, like so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think it just became this cycle. And I didn't really realize it until my senior year how much I was doing it. And I was like, do I really know anything like for myself and my personal relationship with the Lord?
Mm.
And at that time too, I didn't really want to think about college because I had such a, and still do have such a good church
Yeah.
family here
Mm-hmm.
and just Christ centered community. I was like, I'm just scared and I don't want to think about that. Like
Change is hard.
change is hard. But I think you have to be, sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable, but when
Mm-hmm.
you're uncomfortable, change is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it was definitely an uncomfortable time, like having to face that head on when the time
Mm-hmm.
came. I was like, there's no way around it now. Like, and I had people telling me, like, in youth group leading up to it, like, okay, have you thought about what you're
I
going to
know that
do
would
when you're on
stress you out
campus?
when you ask
Yeah,
questions. That's how I tried not
no,
to.
what, I can't mask my stress with my face very well. I was like, I
It's
can't
fun.
take this again. And now I got to do that to Caleb. Like, what are you going to do since you're a senior?
Yeah.
But anyways, um, yeah, it was just, it was healthy pressure. Like they wanted the best for me, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I was definitely stressed, like you
Yeah.
noticed. And then the time came, and it's welcome weekend, and I was really freaking out, very anxious that weekend because I was like, what do I do now? I don't have my family, like my
Mm-hmm.
family or my church family, and
Yeah.
I'm on my own. What now? And that was just really a time where I had to like step it up really
Mm-hmm.
and be an adult in my walk with the Lord spiritually,
Yeah.
and going to college on my own independently. So
Yeah.
I that's when I really realized like it's so important to not just feed off of others' faiths,
Yeah.
and let the Lord feed you himself, not just go to other people, but
Yeah.
make sure you're feeding yourself and having that personal relationship and trying to cultivate that relationship that way.
Yeah.
That way you're not left with just the words that other people are saying and you don't actually know them, like
Yeah.
for yourself and in your own heart and mind. I think
Yeah.
that's something I would definitely advise.
Yeah. And simple steps, I would say, to cultivating a deeper relationship with the Lord. Like, even even if you have to set a timer on your phone
Mm-hmm.
and set your phone outside of the room and like start out with even 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes in prayer, or I'm going to spend 5 minutes in the Word, like reading through, or like maybe listening to something. So I love listening to the Bible in the morning. So, and that will walk me through the Bible in a year. I've done that for years now.
Mm.
And then at nighttime is when I like, Dakota and I will both like lay down and spend time in the Word. And sometimes it's just like getting a page out, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm so exhausted by that point. But just spending that intentional time with Him. And the more time you spend with him, the more time you want to spend with him and the more you learn about his character, and never like dive into the word saying like, what does it say about me, because it's not written about me, thank God. Like nobody would want to read that story for thousands of years. Like, could you imagine? But it is written about him. So like, how does this teach me more about God and his character, and like how he is never changing and how he will fulfill his promises.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we can like just understanding in the word the different genres of books in the Bible. So you think about like Proverbs is a wisdom, so it's going to
Mm-hmm.
give a lot of wisdom. And in Proverbs it talks about how like when you raise your child in the Lord, they will not depart from it. And some people are like, well, that's not right. I raised my kid in church and now they're like not living for the Lord at all. And that is a wisdom thing, right? So it's not a prophecy. The prophecies will come true. So there's different books in the Bible that are specific, like Isaiah.
Mm.
Isaiah is a book of prophecy, and it's a wonderful book to read because it's crazy that that long ago it did predict so much about Jesus's birth and life and all these things. But Proverbs saying that is saying like it is good to raise your child in the church and teach them that. And like, yes, unfortunately sometimes they do depart. Like that was my story. I was raised in the church and I departed from it. Like I still had that inkling God was still pursuing me, and I still had that desire to go to church, but I was still like partying and like
Mm-hmm.
not living for him. Um and he continued. He wasn't like, whatever, you're done. Like he continued to pursue me. So don't lose hope if your child seems to be wayward, or like just read the story of the prodigal son and get into that. But yeah, just knowing the different genres and a study Bible
Definitely.
and being a part of a small
Oh
group
yeah,
like that
study
helps
Bibles.
so much.
Definitely.
So, how was the transition from going to living in the Christian household?
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about this, and sitting under your dad's teaching as a pastor your whole life, and then moving out on your own into college and having to find a whole new Christian community and church family at college. So, do you have anything to add to that? Because I know you talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. It was definitely hard
Yeah.
to navigate because I wasn't even trying to prepare myself for what was going to happen because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want it to happen. Like I was excited to start college and see what it was like, but I'm also a homebody, and I'm just used to being with my family
Yeah.
and what's familiar and comfortable here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, navigating that was really difficult because I had the only teaching I'd ever known and have been under in the church was my dad's. So I wasn't really used, pardon me, I
You're
wasn't
good.
really used to any other style of teaching. So when I went off to college and I just decided to go to the church that um, the majority of Chi Alpha, our Fairmont Chi
Mm-hmm.
Alpha, goes to, and it is a AG, Assembly of God Church. So it was a little different from what I'm
Mm-hmm.
used to, and just the size of that church itself.
Yeah.
It's probably like 3 times bigger than Covenant here. So
Yeah.
it was just a lot of factors of something that was new, and I didn't really know how to process it
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't let myself process that I was leaving and there was
Mm-hmm.
going to be a change like that. So I think that's something that stunned me there. And I think I experienced like a culture shock in a way
Mm-hmm.
of one stepping out into college
Yeah.
and figuring out how to be more independent,
Mm-hmm.
and two, leaving my home church and trying to find a church to go to while at school.
Yeah.
So at first I was hesitant to even listen to the pastor, and he's a good pastor. It was just
Yeah.
my state of mind and my posture of my heart in
Yeah.
that moment. I was just resistant to anything that was being said because I was
Yeah.
like, "You're not my dad, so I don't think I'm gonna listen to what you're saying." Which is childish now, but I was really angry for a few weeks. Like every time Sunday would come, I'm just like I was trying to nitpick everything he was saying,
Mm.
which one is unfair, and
Yeah.
two, I could have been missing a lot of truth that was spoken in that message.
Yeah.
And
It's very humble of you to admit.
it was definitely difficult
Yeah.
because I was so I I guess I was just, yeah, angry about the
Mhm.
change
Yeah.
because I wanted it to stay the same in that aspect.
Well, and with all the changes, like if you guys moving here and there and
Mhm.
like you finally started opening up and being a part of like, and I think people who maybe their parents travel for work or like are in the military and have those moves, it can be easy, like you were
Mhm.
saying, to just, I'm not going to form any bonds here. That way it's not as hard when we moved. And then when you finally did, and then you had to, move
Try to start
again. And
new in that way.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's hard. Um, so how did stepping outside of your comfort zone? So you went on a missions trip
Yes.
last year. You went to Egypt, and
I
I
did.
remember just talking even with your parents while you were at college, like back here, and they were nervous about it. And they're like, "Do you
Definitely.
realize like this is going on right in Israel, and
Mhm.
you guys are right here? And then let me show you a map." Like, and so it was hard for them to um just to wrestle with that even, and they have such strong faith. And so,
Mhm.
and I remember going back to when I went on my first international missions trip to Southeast Asia, and
Yes.
I remember talking to your dad about it, and I was like, yeah, my family's really nervous about me going, they're feeling on edge about it. And I was like, but I told him like the safest place that I can be is at the center of God's will. And he was like, uh, I don't know if that it's the safest place you can be, but it's the best place you can be. And I was like, yeah, that's true, because where I was going, it wasn't necessarily like super safe,
Sure,
especially
yeah.
not safe to talk about the Lord and to share
Mm.
the gospel with others and to hand out Bibles in their own language.
Mhm.
So it is hard as a parent. Like I can't imagine like one day, like I hope they have that calling to go out and share the gospel in the world, but like I know
Right.
my anxious heart's gonna be like, God, I'm gonna have to just be surrendered. Like that's just a word that keeps coming up over and over. But
Yes.
so what was that like on your end, stepping out of your comfort zone?
Yes, definitely, again, just stepping out of my comfort zone. Um I am a really anxious person.
Mm-hmm.
You know this, like, you've seen me walk through different things and have been a person I've opened up to
Yeah.
through our girls study group that I've been going to for, like we mentioned, a handful of years. So Chi Alpha, they bring up different mission trip opportunities at the beginning of the year. I think they do it in October,
Mm-hmm.
and there's usually like three different options. There's usually two that are in the country,
Mm-hmm.
and one that is overseas. And what we did last year, we did it differently this year, but last year to apply, there was a paper form, and
Mm-hmm.
then you would rank them in the order that you would prefer to be placed
Mm-hmm.
on those trips. And as soon as they mentioned Egypt, Cairo, I was just, there was like a pressing on my heart, and I wasn't like familiar with this feeling of like being drawn and called
Mm-hmm.
to really want to go to that place and see what the Lord is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just stirring on my heart, and I was praying about it, thinking about it, and talking about it with my friends before I really brought it up and told my parents I want to go to Cairo.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of discussion like, are you sure you don't just want to go there because you've never traveled? And I'm sure that that is a factor. Sure, you want to see the world,
Mm-hmm.
but to do it on mission is
Yeah,
in a different lens, you
for
know?
sure.
So to be able to have that opportunity presented, I was just really intrigued and wanted to know what that was like.
Mm-hmm.
So I put that down as number one on my mission trip form,
Yeah.
and I discussed it with my mom and dad, and they were definitely resistant because, like you said,
Yeah.
there was a lot of things going on, not in Cairo,
Yeah. But
but
near. Yeah.
very near. And I still had a piece about it, which was
Mm-hmm.
really strange to me because I am such an anxious person.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know I know you're worried. I know you're stressed. And typically I am those things too. But right now I have this peace about
Yeah.
wanting to go.
Yeah.
And so I put number one and we turn it in. And usually the day you turn it in, the staff of Chi Alpha, after the Monday night worships we have,
Mhm.
after that night, they are praying over it. It's a really prayer filled process. It's not really, they're trying to pull strings to get this person
Right.
on a certain trip.
Right.
Um, they go about that, and as they pray, they place certain people on trips. And usually the guys all go and hang out someplace, and the girls in another. And you'll either get a text or call saying you're going to a certain trip. And then I got a call that they told me I was going to Cairo, Egypt, and I was just like crying and sobbing, and
Oh.
I was like, "Are you really? Are you for real right now?" Like, I was at a
Yeah.
loss for words,
Yeah.
and that's when I was really certain. I was like, "Okay, the Lord, He's calling me to to do this and
Yeah.
step out in this way."
Yeah.
Which is definitely out of my zone of comfort,
Yeah.
which I really like to stay in a lot of the times, but these past few years, especially since going off to college, he's teaching me like it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Mhm. God does not call us to live in our comfort zone.
No,
I've
not at
learned
all.
that it's like over and over and over again. He's like, step out of your comfort zone
Yes,
because that's what grows our faith.
exactly.
Because when we stay in our comfort zone, we wouldn't need him, right? We wouldn't have to lean into him and fully
Mm-hmm.
rely on him. Like it's in the unknown that we're like, you're just Jesus, take the wheel because I have no idea what's
Exactly.
going on.
And oh, a little sidetrack. You said unknown, and I
Yeah.
remember like we did words of the year in youth
Yes.
group,
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too. I thought of that earlier. Okay, so go ahead.
and we had prayed about it for a few minutes in youth
Yeah.
group, and my word was unknown, and we wrote it all
Mhm.
like on the chalkboard we have over
Yeah.
here, and I really I wasn't entirely sure why I wrote that either, and then of course like everyone was asking why did you write unknown, like why would you do that, and
Yeah.
then like I just had this kind of moment of clarity, even though I wasn't sure what the future was going to look like that year,
Yeah.
because um it was 2023 in January, and I'm
Mhm.
the class of 2023, and I graduated, so I knew I was going to be going off to college. But at the start of that year, I didn't know where I was going to be going to college. Wasn't certain what I wanted to study and what life was going to look like from after graduating high school, because it's
Mhm.
really just changed from then on out.
Right.
So I think unknown was just learning to how to trust him in the unknown, and
Yes.
how important it is to trust him because he holds our future. He knows what's
Yeah,
next.
exactly.
So we have to learn to trust him that he's going to guide our every step, because he will.
Mhm. And I feel like I remember you saying that even when you wrote it, you were like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's no, like there's so much that's unknown. I'm just going to trust him in the unknown. And little did you know he was going to call you to Egypt.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's such a
That's really
crazy
crazy to
thing.
think about.
So, okay, I wanted to bring it up. Do you feel like there was a word of the year? Did you feel like God laying one on your heart for this upcoming year or
I was thinking about that.
okay.
Um I think consistency.
I like that. That's a good one.
Just learning to stay in the word
Yeah.
and not be lazy
Yeah.
in my walk, cuz you can't be lazy if you want to grow.
Yeah.
And especially I've been challenged this last semester with my devotional life and learning to prioritize that. And it's something I'm learning every day,
Mhm.
but it's so important because you won't know what's in the word if you don't go into it yourself and
Yep.
set that time aside with him.
That's
And
so
it was
good.
something I was challenged with, like as a leader as well,
Mhm.
and wanting to be a leader that is teaching truth and not
Mhm.
just spewing out nonsense to make myself look good.
Yeah.
And it's
Because we are
something,
like held accountable for what we teach, which
yes,
can be a scary thing. But that like it does push you on to learning more for yourself and then admitting like the other you were there when y'all were asking all those questions about like heaven and stuff like that.
Oh,
And there's so much
yes.
that's unknown. And like I said, I've read through the Bible like many, many times,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I could answer like two of your all's questions. And I was like, these are really good questions. I'm gonna do research myself. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna talk to Pastor Dale. So your dad like gave me some insight on it too. But just being humble in that way as a leader, not saying like, this is what I think, this is what I feel, because like we could be saying stuff that's not sound, and
Yes.
like where
Which is
we,
scary.
yes, it is. So we never want to like be in that like
Definitely.
that space. So a word that for this upcoming year, a
Mm-hmm.
word that I felt like God was laying on my heart, which I was like, God, can you pick a different one? Was surrender.
Ooh.
And I've already seen, I know we're just like in the beginning of it, but just within these past few weeks, I've seen God ask me to surrender over and over again. And again, when I said like change is scary, like that's a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing. And I felt like for so long, I was going like a million miles an hour and I did not feel burnout whatsoever. Like I was babysitting 60 hours a week at least, and then like leading multiple groups that probably added up to at least like 10 hours a week with that, not to
Yes.
include like the prep behind all of it. And um but he has been slowly asking me like, well, with the whole thing, like stepping back from leading youth on Sundays, that was a super hard thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. It was so hard, but I knew God was leading me to do that. And then like he's been laying on my heart to like step back a little bit on my babysitting schedule too, and like because I'm with my kids, yes, but like I my attention is going a million different directions,
Mm-hmm.
caring for all the kids like in my care, and I love them like they're my own. But he's like asked me to step back some with that, so that was a hard thing. And I like told the parents this past week like the change in my schedule. I guess we haven't gotten to catch up some, so we'll talk more about it on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
But all the parents were so gracious. Like I figured some would be
Mm.
like, that just doesn't work with our schedule, which would be understandable, but every single one was like, we're really happy for you. We're gonna work it out in our schedule. We're still keeping our kids with you.
That's
So
awesome.
it was cool how God like went before me in that way. And
Yes.
it's scary to change things. And I hate like letting people down too, but I know like I used to be way more of a people pleaser, and yes, I don't want anybody to be upset with me, but my priorities are different. Like I want to be obedient to the Lord before pleasing people, you know what I mean? So if he's calling
Mm.
me to do something that I'm like, okay, it might be letting somebody down, but like it is what God's calling me to, so I'm gonna do
That's
that
good.
into the uncomfortable and like trust him through it.
That's something
So
I'm still learning.
it's, well, me too. I think it's going to be a lifelong thing for me just
Oh,
because of
definitely.
you have a similar
I
personality
do.
type from me. So like I can relate to you in that way. So it's hard. Like change is hard, and
Definitely.
stepping back is hard because I'm so productivity driven, which sounds like a good thing, but it's not, because it's hard for me to like rest. And I just sense that he's like telling me you need to start taking a Sabbath if you don't shut yourself down for a
Mm.
day and like quit being so like really controlling over keeping up with everything. Like I'm gonna make it so you have to rest, you know? So
Mm.
like it's hard because that's just a different thing for me to learn. So just yeah, I'm like, God, can there be good parts of the surrender too? There are blessings, because I am gonna get more one-on-one time. It was very
Mm.
eye-opening. Like over Christmas I took almost a week off. And just being with my kids, like they were so much more chill. They got along a lot better. Like I was able to play with them more because I wasn't, there's a lot to do to keep up with all the things. So it was very sweet week, like to get that one-on-one time with them, because
Yes.
I don't get that
Mm.
very often. So yeah, so we'll see how else God asks me to
Yeah,
surrender.
definitely.
Yeah, and that's how we all should live. But for it to be like such a focus in my life right now, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also scary and unknown to
Right.
live that way. Um, what were some of the main things that you learned about the Lord, the world, and yourself on your missions trip?
I learned so much, and
Mm-hmm.
I think to this day I'm still processing it.